The Discourse starts right now with Cheryl Oates and Erica Barudis.
Welcome back to The Discourse. 50,000 teachers across the province plan to strike next week after failing to come to a labor agreement with the government. This will mark the largest teacher strike in Alberta's history. The province has seen nothing like it since 2002, when 20,000 teachers went on strike for 3 weeks. And today we're dedicating the episode to the politics and the implications of the strike and what we can expect over the next weeks. Plus, we're going to touch on the latest in the corrupt care scandal and the latest drama coming out of the Alberta Next panel, where Executive Director Bruce McAllister is making headlines for the way he spoke to a Calgary teen.
So before we jump into the implications of all of this, a little bit of an update for what we anticipate, because they haven't officially gone on strike, but that will start on October 6th if there's not some magic that happens between now and then between the ATA and the government. The teachers' collective agreement expired in August of 2024 after failed bargaining and mediation between the government of Alberta and the ATA, or their collective bargaining bodies, to reach a new agreement. And then the teachers overwhelmingly voted in favor to strike in June, as we all remember. And we covered that on a podcast. That one was supported by the Alberta Teachers Union. This new one came forward and they went to vote for their members and issued a strike notice in September and saying that no action, conveniently once they get paid September 30th, that no action would be set till October 6th. Over this past weekend, the teachers, members of the ATA, went and voted, and we're looking at an 89% vote against the agreement on the table that ATA hasn't supported. They just presented to their members. So that's the update till now.
So there's a chance, right? There's a chance the two sides can still reach an agreement, but so far, it hasn't sounded likely. And 90%, 89.5% is a pretty huge majority who voted against this latest offer. So just maybe to give you a bit of background, to offer a bit of background on the key issues on the table. Teachers obviously have been asking for a raise. The government has offered 12% over 3 years. Is that right? 3 years?
4 years. Or 3 years,
4
yeah.
years.
4 years. 3, 3, and 3.
Thank you.
Math, hard.
Math is hard. Teachers have been asking for more funding for the education system, which has been chronically underfunded. They've asked for additional teachers. They've asked for additional EAs. The government has come to the table with some of those things, offering 3,000 teachers over 3 years, so 1,000 teachers a year, and a whole bunch of additional EA staff. And then the cherry on top of the government's offer, in their latest offer, they have said, don't worry, teachers, we will pay for your COVID night shots.
Yeah. Can I jump in?
And the
There's just
teachers
one
voted
more
against that.
piece. There's one more piece to that, and that there is, and it's kind of in the weeds. I didn't understand it until recently, but previously school boards had discrepancies in their funding to teachers. It could be based on region, school boards, how they allocated, and what the ATA has asked the government is to help level that playing field. They're referring to it as the grid. And so the government presented, I think in the first or from the outset, this grid where all teachers will kind of be equal. So it's not like you're a first year in, my understanding, Northern Alberta or Northern Edmonton would get different than an inner city school or maybe a new South Edmonton school, for example, or across the province. So the ask was to level this grid off, which would obviously have some pay increases, which is, I think, where you sometimes see the 12% becoming 17% for some teachers. The government moved that from 2027 to 2026 up. So there's also this level playing field for teachers, which I hope also encourages teachers to go to various schools and also encourages that new placement of all those teachers. Another inner collective bargaining chip that the government, what ATA asked for, was a grid allocation. Government proposed 2027. In the next round, it was 2026. So I think both sides on that one kind of compromised for the best interest of collective bargaining.
So now we're at the spot where the government feels like they have, in their words, given teachers what they want. It's 12% over 4 years, just to be clear. Apologies for the confusion around that. 12% over 4 years. And like it looks like we are heading towards a strike October 6th. It looks like we will likely have I think it's like 700,000 kids out of school as teachers, principals, vice principals all go on strike that day. Do you want to just offer the government's statement
Mhm.
on the latest in the
Yeah.
uh, bargaining?
Yeah, of course. So there's 2. So there was, like, the vote happened Monday evening. The Minister of Treasury Board or Minister of Finance, President of Treasury Board issued a statement. If you don't know, oddly, it's not education that deals with it. Finance deals with all collective bargaining. So he is kind of the spokesperson leading this. I'm just going to paraphrase, but his statement has been posted online. We might post it here, who knows? But that he's disappointed. That's kind of been the narrative of the government that Alberta teachers have voted to reject the tentative agreement for a 4-year central agreement. It's now up to the unions to determine its next steps. With 2 failed ratification votes, I am left questioning whether the union fully understands what their members are seeking. If teachers did not want this, then why was it proposed by the ATA in the first place? I encourage ATA's leadership, so calling on them, to take time to meet with their members and gain clarity on what the teachers are seeking out of this deal. Students and families deserve stability. Then on Tuesday, so the day after, the Premier, Minister of Finance, and Minister of Education held a press conference, and they outlined, given, like Cheryl said, the anticipated strike. It's not official yet, but if that is the case, the government is taking the following measures to support children and parents by providing $150 each week of the strike per child that's under the age of 12, which could go towards, daycare, clubs, activities that you can enroll them in, given that they are not of age to stay by themselves. You have to do that by signing up on the Alberta website. They've deemed it to be seamless, although I'll wait for that, as well as online resources. And the Minister of Education went over it, of weekly programming and resources and tools in the hopes of at least helping students be able to keep up with their studies. So that's kind of where we're at. It appears that the government also feels that the likelihood of this strike going ahead is, they're planning for it. And so they've
Mhm.
also released a bunch of ads that speak to it on what the deal is and or what these supports for parents. So the money that would be have gone to teachers for this bargaining or this week, they're allocating right back to the pockets of the parents to help offset maybe some of the challenges they'll see in what could be weeks or months.
Yeah, I don't really get it. Like the idea that by next week you can get your kid into a daycare, childcare, or a camp seems like a bit of a stretch. Like, understand the politics of it, but the idea that people are going to be able to find care that quickly, I think it's going to be really tough.
You'd be surprised, actually. I've seen a lot of organizations say, like, things like the YMCA, different variation of community clubs. I don't know daycare, like that might be different, but I think weekly activities where they can be registered is actually they're popping up quite quickly. I think a lot of these organizations were also preparing for it. And so does it address the mass? No, but do all parents need this? I don't know. Or could you hire a babysitter of one of these, 14 and above year olds that maybe could make some money as this is out, right? Like, I think that that's where the 150 is, like, parents, you choose how to best use these funds, but we're here to give that money to you to support whatever that looks like for you. But I actually
Yeah.
have been surprised. We've seen a lot of camps and things like that pop up.
Yeah. I mean, 700,000 kids, though. That's a lot of kids to find camps for.
Yeah, better than nothing.
Well, I mean, is it though? Like, to me, it seems like in a strike, in a moment like this, where especially where, everybody's going to know about it, it's on the front page of the paper, it's in the political discourse, everybody's talking about it. Obviously, each side is trying to position themselves as like the hero or the victim in all of this.
Mhm.
And trying to make the other side look like it's actually these guys' fault that your kids are out of school and not getting the education that they deserve. I think sending people money is just a bargaining chip in that. Obviously, if you're in a situation where you have to find care for your kid next week, and the government's like, listen, we know that's really tough. We're going to just send you a check. That doesn't hurt for political points.
Mhm.
But in terms of an end game, like in terms of actually reaching a deal with teachers, and in terms of properly funding the education system, and in terms of having the education system that, this whole strike is based on, I think it does nothing to get us to that goal.
Yeah, so I want to ask you 2 questions because I went through all of the communication, and I guess my big question, looking at actually other collective bargaining, like, what is the ATA looking for? Like specifically, is it a salary increase at this point? Like, is it the 12% they're fighting for? Is it more resources in the classroom? Is it most like you look at a lot of other nurses, for example, they came in, they were like guns ablazing, 35% increase. And the government was like, no way, nice try. And they reached a compromise. I mean, what they asked for, which is what they got, was not the same thing. And I didn't see any of that from the ATA. So I'm not asking you to look at the crystal ball and know this answer, but where do you think, like, what do you think the ATA is actually still looking for?
So I wondered that question too and went back through all of their stuff because the government has conceded on a couple of things.
Hmm.
Truthfully, when you look at the overall conversation here and you look at the inflection point that it feels like education is at in Alberta and families are at in Alberta, I think the teachers and the ATA sees an opportunity here to fight for something, not just in the immediate term to say like, yeah, we got our raise, but fight for
Hmm.
something for the long term to say like, it's one thing to give teachers a raise and it's one thing to add 3,000 teachers, but how does the education system remain sustainable overall in Alberta?
Hmm.
And the government has offered nothing on that path. And if it keeps down the path that it has been, we're talking about chronically underfunding the healthcare system too, but the education system in
We'll
the
get to
long
that.
term. And so I think teachers feel like they have some leverage right now. People are paying attention. They have a ton of support. People are invested. Most people agree that the education system in Alberta is underfunded. And so they're going to push, push, push to say, how do we change this in the long term so we don't end up back in this position next time we are in bargaining?
Yeah. And so I think that's interesting because I think that's a fair fight to pick, but the scope of the ATA and this collective bargaining really does come down to salary. It comes down to benefits and some classroom complexities. So I get why they maybe are picking the fight now, but the ability for that to come to full fruition. I disagree with you because I think, one, we are in a unique situation. I think we all know 250,000 new people coming to our province. Nobody could have predicted this. It doesn't matter who is in government, but this influx of newcomers, whether they're immigrants or emigrants, that Alberta calling campaign really did work and kind of hate it now. But we have so many new people that our schools can't be built fast enough. Our teachers can't be hired fast enough. And if they do have teachers, where are they going to teach? There's not classrooms for that. And so I do get that we are at a pressure point, but I think that there is grace that I don't think the ATA is even considering that like we got this unique situation. And I'd say similar to the NDP, a unique situation of not having oil at a high revenue or a dollar per barrel rate that could actually address or give a raise. Same with Kenny, a unique COVID situation that put the government in a place where the raise wasn't possible. This government is giving them the biggest raise that they've seen in over a decade. And in a place where it's like nothing can be solved overnight. So 3,000 teachers, I see one that's a 3-year sustainability model with likely additional, maybe that's the new path we have going forward. You can only operate, as you know, on 3-4 year cycles. And so putting 3,000 doesn't fix the problem, but it actually, I think, will really help. We have 2,000 graduates of teachers a year, with usually based on enrollment 200, 400, 600. The government's saying we're going to automatically find spots for 1,000 of them. So that's huge. And I don't think the government has maybe broken that down about what that's going to mean. Did we get this variable of 250,000 people? Like, that's why our healthcare is also struggling. Not the only reason I'll say, but like, we have so many people. We have an unemployment rate that's super high. So we have so many new people in our province. And so, yeah, the structure isn't as strong as it used to be, meaning like there is challenges, but we've also got this huge influx. We're going from like 50,000 students possibly to about 80,000 next year. That's huge growth. And we can't
Okay,
build
but
schools fast enough. We can't build, like, I think it's just like, I don't get what they're going to be asking for. I've heard classroom caps. I don't know how you deal with that.
so I think a couple of things there, and we've talked about this on a previous podcast. Maybe we don't have to go too in depth here, but
Hmm.
like Danielle Smith ran basically on a platform of growing Alberta, of saying we're going to have this huge economy. We're going to be competing in terms of population in Canada. To say that and to launch a campaign that Alberta is calling, and then
That
turn
was
around and
Jason
say, well,
Kenney.
but Danielle Smith kept that campaign
Yep.
going. It kept going under Danielle Smith. And she herself went around saying Alberta is calling.
Hmm.
And then to turn around and say, well, we just don't have the money for that. Like, to me, that doesn't make sense. Daniel Smith herself said this province is growing at an exponential rate.
Mhm.
And at the bare minimum, the province could choose. Yes, finances are tight, but budgets are all about priorities. The province could choose at the very least to fund enrollment growth. And not just now when we have an influx of people coming in, but since 2019, the government hasn't funded enrollment growth. And when you have year after year after year after year of not funding enrollment growth, you end up in a place where, yeah, it's really tough to make up that deficit. And that's exactly why teachers are saying we can't take it any longer. We need a long-term plan that gets us back to having the resources that we need in classrooms and the right size classroom, the right number of kids in classrooms, because a 3% raise isn't going to change any of that.
So I hear you on that. Two things. I know that you've referenced the study, I think it's Fraser Institute, that gives students just like 1,350 or something to that per student. It is lower than most places. That's a study from
Every place.
20, fair, but 21, 22. I actually think the
But it's
government
not
is doing
different.
disservice. But if you take in next year when they get 1,000 new teachers, that's a huge investment in the 1,000 new teachers are 3 over 3 years, 1,500 new EAs, like that actually goes into the equation of cost per student. So I think the government should actually crunch those numbers because I don't think that then we would be the lowest in the province. They did a market assessment for what teachers make. We also have the lowest taxes in the province or in the country. So
It
if
would
we
take a
make
lot,
more than a
though.
teacher in Vancouver, and fair, I don't know the numbers, but I would say I think that might help the government's argument because right now they're at the bottom. But with all of these injections of funds, the 400 million in dealing with classroom complexities, there's a lot of things that they've invested, again, like the new additional EAs, that supports it. New teachers addresses smaller classrooms. Like, I think that is a student tuition, amount per student is a stat that really works for the narrative that we don't fund enough. I think with all of these commitments, the government needs to go back and show what that actually does equal for a student number. Because I don't think that stat is realistic anymore in 2021 to now.
So, I mean, you work with the latest data that you have, and Alberta hasn't increased its funding, so it shouldn't have expected to move up the list to
But with the
any
promise and the
more.
commitment now, I'm
Okay,
saying,
but
like,
here's
what
the
they
thing.
haven't done is showed that.
I understand. The teachers have actually done that calculation. And if you would like to look, they've put a very helpful tool on their website, Stop
you
the
sent it to me.
Excuses, where you can look at what it would take to bring funding in Alberta up to not even the national average, although you can see the national average as well, what it would take to bring funding in Alberta even up to Saskatchewan's level, which is the next lowest in the country. Maybe they should crunch the numbers, but those are big, big numbers. And when you look at, you can go school by school in the tool as well. So I just checked the schools in my own neighborhood. The high school that is closest to my house needs 21 teachers. And there are 2,500 schools in Alberta, 3,000 teachers. If we're just assuming that every school in Alberta needs a little bit, that's like just over one teacher per school in Alberta. So the idea that 3,000 teachers, for sure, it's a start. It sounds like a lot, but 1,000 teachers a year doesn't even touch what the current deficit is in Alberta.
But I get that, Cheryl, but if you hire 2,000 teachers and you don't have schools for them to be operating in and you don't have portables that can be built within that year, I mean, I think that's why they're staggering it. What are they going to do? Like sit in a field? So this is, I think, the problem that if you're, and again,
that the
like
UCP created. Yeah, it's a tough problem to solve when you don't build schools.
But they weren't the
you
only
underfund,
ones
you
creating
don't hire
it.
teachers.
They weren't.
But they've made it way worse since
the
2019.
schools announced under the NDP are just coming to fruition. A school takes at least 3 to 5 years to build. So Danielle Smith has announced copious amounts of schools. Those mostly won't open till after the next election because that's how long it takes. So this isn't just a UCP problem. I do think that
the biggest
NDP
issue is the
need
UCP,
to own
though.
it.
No, the
I
NDP
disagree. For
fund
4 years
growth.
of 10. But enrollment growth is tied directly to salary, Cheryl. So
And
I don't even
didn't
understand how
slash
you do that. You
EAs.
didn't. But EAs aren't even under the collective agreement of the ATA. They're a totally different union. So you're saying you cut from the ATA bargaining.
You're missing the point.
Then take 12% and give it all into classroom complexities. Give them 10, right?
That's not
and that's what I don't get.
for.
I don't get what the ATA. This is what I'm saying is the ATA wants everything, but you can't have everything.
But the ATA is making a point, and that's what bargaining is. You're never going to get everything that you're asking for. The ATA
Well, I
is
think
making
they
a
think they
point,
are.
not that EAs are included in their collective agreement, but
Mhm.
when you are pushing, you're not just pushing for wages, of course, you're pushing for working conditions. And even if you get a 12% raise over 4 years, your working conditions are dependent on whether you have supports in classrooms to help the kids that are in your class, and whether you have class sizes that are workable, and whether there is funding within the school for all the things that the government is expecting of you as a teacher inside the public education system. And so, yes, those things are outside the collective agreement, but they all have a direct impact on working conditions and the ability of teachers to do their jobs. And that's why they have become a part of the bargaining process.
Right. And this brings me back to the question, though. Is it the ATA asking for more money for their direct teachers? Are they fine with the 12% and they want more money there? What is the number? Because 1,000 is way higher than any other government has ever introduced for hiring. But if we don't have the schools that's a decade of issues of building schools and being able to have classrooms to put these people in, especially when we got dumped with a bunch of new people that we had never accounted for in population growth. Like, I guess I'm just like, what is the teacher number for them? Because they haven't said it.
But
What
that,
is the
but
number of EAs they think they need? Like, to me, it's when you're negotiating, you should have an idea of what you're asking for. I don't know if the ATA is mad that they're not getting 15% or if they're not getting 2,000 teachers next year. That is what's unclear and what would make them, because I don't think there's more money to give to teachers. To be honest, I
so
think politically they're not going to move.
So I agree. They haven't been sharing that stuff publicly. That doesn't mean that there isn't a conversation going on privately. But I would say that the government does not get credit. It's really hard for the government to take credit for starving the system year after year after year. So say, we needed 10 teachers in 2020, we hired 5. We needed 10 teachers in 20, I'm just making it up. And then you end up with this huge deficit. And then at the end of that, say, we're hiring a historic number. Well, of course you are. Of course you're hiring a historic number because you haven't been hiring the right number for the last 6 years. I don't think the
Right. I
government
mean,
gets
I'd
credit for
also
that.
say not giving, I think where I sit is like I had Nenshi coming out, and I know we chatted about that, but like the NDP also didn't give an increase. So the ownership of teachers not having a salary increase, which is a huge portion of what is allocated to classroom funding or student funding, that is a big, big piece of the formula. So you might have put it into other things, but like I feel like the NDP's argument that this is ridiculous, we need to fix it right now. Like, again, how? Is it on the price that teachers get to be in a classroom? Because to me, that isn't one, I think, where the government's going to move. And two, giving someone more money to do their job doesn't fix like the desire for smaller classrooms. It doesn't fix the need for, if you have students with high needs in your class, how do you address them? Like, I think that I'm confused that the ATA is pushing for more money in their collective bargaining, like from 12%, which I think is a lost cause because it is very similar to everyone in the market value. I just don't know what in that collective agreement on classroom complexities they're pushing for. And so I do think it was a horrible miss or maybe miscommunication to the members, because a lot of people I know are striking because they want more money, not dealt with in the classroom. And so again, I think it comes back, and I do agree with the Minister of Finance that I think that the union is misrepresenting what their members have or not communicating to their members. We're not going to budge on this 12%. The government isn't going to cave. But
But you know
here's where
what?
we can win.
Teachers are so frustrated though, and like I saw it. I saw the union, I saw the ATA say we're going to present this in a neutral way. We're not going to advocate for the membership voting one way or another. I read that 89.5% vote as like a protest vote to say we cannot keep doing what we've been doing in the conditions that we are currently in. We can't be being asked to do all these different things. We can't be being asked to participate in a book ban and participate in notifying parents of pronouns and all these things. Like, teachers are so frustrated that on top of a system that is chronically underfunded, that they were going to vote no in most circumstances.
Yeah, but then it comes back to what is it that the teachers actually want? And is the ATA aware of that? And have they coached them? Like, if I was going to my members and they're saying, we want 20%, just making this up. And you're like, you should advise your members of what is realistic or not, because it's not the ATA that's going on strike and getting strike pay and then not getting paid. It's teachers. And I'm very concerned that what the ATA is setting members up to have for expectations of how this is going to play out. I agree. Lots of protest vote there. But are they educated by the ATA on what this really looks like? I would sit there based on knowing all of this and all the conversations, the government doing market analysis. I don't think they're going to budge on 12%, because then they got to go back and fight with everyone else that they got 12%. So
I
it's
mean,
like, how are we working for? I agree. Like, if the ATA said we actually need 2,000, 4,000, 6,000 teachers and and we need those portables immediately, like the analysis of how much classroom space, because it's not Field of Dreams. You can put the teachers there, but it doesn't make classroom space appear. I don't know. I guess my biggest frustration is I don't know what would be an agreement or a compromise for the ATA. I don't even know if they know.
well, I mean, I think part of it would be a whole different approach from the government. Like, at this point, it's a government having a complete reset with the education system and with teachers to say, in the long term, we're going to do better. We're not going to do these things, and we are going to do these things. Personally, that's what I think they're looking for. But neither one of us is at the bargaining table or has the insight into how those conversations are going. I did just want to talk about how this played out in Saskatchewan a little bit. Not to say that it's a complete analog to what's happening in Alberta, but just interesting when you think about the dynamics and the politics around like any kind of public sector strike, but specifically in this case, teacher strike. There was a dispute in Saskatchewan, a teacher's dispute in 2 years ago in 2023. And the government at the time took a really, really hard line. And in fact, they put up billboards basically showing like, here's how much teachers get paid and here's the national average, trying to make the case that teachers already get paid enough. And it completely, in my view, backfired. And I say that because there was public opinion research released basically saying that education, which had been way down the list in terms of priorities that people cared about, shot up to number one. And if that's not your strength, which I would not say that that's the Sask Party's strength, if that's not your strength, you don't want that to be the number one issue in the province. And then secondly, when the polling showed how people felt about the current dispute and where their political allegiance was, of course, all the NDP were with the teachers. But interestingly, the Sask Party base split evenly. So half of the base was with the teachers and half of the base is with the government. And that is such a gift to opposition parties when you can have your whole base with you and have half of the government's base with you. That is such a gift to opposition parties. And so, like I said, not a complete analog to Alberta, but I do think that was part of the reason that set sort of the rhetoric and the sentiment around the election in Saskatchewan, why the NDP did as well as it did.
Yeah, I mean, collective bargaining, you never hope is a year out from an election cycle. And it becomes even more political than I think we're seeing. I will say, I think Carla Beck and the Sask NDP's tactic to approach that is far better than what I'm seeing from the Alberta NDP. And I want to get your takes on that. But yeah, I mean, it's got to be a balance. I actually like how the government of Alberta is approaching it. They've pivoted away from the fight with the teachers and actually just focused on how are we supporting parents. And I think that what they announced yesterday is, again, I don't know if it's diffusing the head-to-head that we see between the government and the ATA, but it's definitely saying, okay, if this is happening, this is what we're focusing on, which I don't think it's going to harm the government. Like you said, who is the villain and who is the victim? We always talk about who the villain is. I think that there's always going to be a group that thinks it's the government and they should just give more money. But I do think that when you sit there and you look at, okay, well, the teachers are on strike. The government's giving me these resources. They're recognizing the hardship financially, emotionally, all of that. And from an education standpoint, they're helping. I would say that I think this is a better political play than the Sask Party did on this. Especially, I mean, we have a couple of years till an election, but looking back, I would not advise, and you would know firsthand how much that gave a bump to the NDP in Saskatchewan. So there is definitely like the political balance. And then there's also just, to your point, how do we fix the system, but we do it in a sustainable and realistic way? And I'm still on the front that, I think that the government of Alberta is doing it as realistic as possible. Again, without even knowing where the ATA sits. mean, every other union comes with what their demands are. We didn't see that from the ATA. And I think that that's maybe where they're losing some of the narrative and what they're setting their
So
members up for. So it's going to play out I think, very different than a lot of the other collective bargaining we've seen in even the last decade.
I think some of it remains to be seen. Like, I don't disagree with you. I think that the UCP has been very careful with their language around this and very careful to not like make it a government versus teachers or government versus kids or government versus education system narrative. Have they completely won that? Like, I don't think so, but I think they've been very careful and very thoughtful about it. The truth is, though, it really, like, no one's striking yet. Like, when we
Mhm.
actually get to the point where teachers are not in classrooms and parents are worried about their kids' education and worried about their care, then this becomes a daily news cycle that is, probably shoots up to number one in terms of the issues in Alberta. And people are watching the granular detail of because they want to know when their kids are going to go back to school. And how the two parties position themselves through that process, I think, is
Mhm.
what is most defining in the long.
Absolutely. I mean, there's risk on both sides, and there's high risk on government because the ATA is only responsible for their members. The government is responsible for Albertans. So I definitely do not think this last time we're talking about it. I gonna put money on the 12% isn't gonna move, but just based on what I've heard the government say and the other collective agreement deals. But we'll see what else. Another COVID vaccine being refunded as a nugget. I don't know. But again, I'd love to see what the ATA's terms are for returning to work, because parents are going to maybe be angry with both equally.
Well, and it'll be interesting too, because each side has some moves left, even after the teachers go on strike. Like, the government could order them back to work. They would need
Hmm.
legislation to do it, and it would be challenged. But they could order teachers back to work. The teachers could defy that order. Should it be handed
Hmm.
down, a la CUPE and the flight attendants, they could just deny it and say we're not going to go back to work and we're willing to take the risk. And obviously, all of those things will need their own specific frames in the public discourse. But there is still, it's not just like teachers go on strike and then
Hmm.
eventually we're going to get a deal. Like, there's a lot of moving pieces that can still take place over the next weeks and months. And on top of that, we know teachers don't get strike pay. So, how long
Hmm.
can they realistically strike before they can't pay their bills? Like, that is obviously a pressure point for teachers as well.
Yeah, there's going to be lots of different moving pieces, like you said. I know Premier Smith was asked yesterday if she would resume the legislature earlier, call it back so that she could do that. She said no. We're hoping that within then and the end of October, when fall session begins, that they don't have to do that. They will possibly legislate, but they're not going to move up session in order to deal with this. Because I think you're right. It's one, how long do they want to strike and what are they asking for? And it appears, based on what the Minister of Finance said, is he's not sure what the ATA is now asking for or their members. And so, yeah, you're right. I mean, let's hope something miraculous happens behind closed doors between now and Monday, but I'm not betting money on it. There's lots of, and I guess maybe we should say, if you are one of those people that has kids under the age of 12, you have to go to the government alberta.ca website and register. It's not just going to be a blank check given to you. So if you do have kids under 12, that is the course of action. Let us know how seamless it was. Ready to move on?
Yes. Before we do that, if you are curious, and you might be if you're listening to this podcast, if you are curious how the government works and want to shape public policy, or maybe you're interested in running campaigns, applications for Macamee College's January intake are now open. So you can sign up for the Applied Politics and Public Affairs Diploma and get the skills you need for public affairs or a political career in less than 2 years. If you want to check it out, you can go to macameecollege.com/programs and click on Applied Politics today.
All right. Meanwhile, the non-report interim report, as I call it, we had as we talk about things looming and resurfacing and how long does it take to reach a consensus or resolve, the AAHS scandal looms. And we are waiting for the interim report that was supposed to be released. The government came out and said will not be released. Cheryl, do you want to take us through how we got here?
I wish I knew how we got here, but the latest is that people who have been following this closely will remember that the government appointed former Manitoba Provincial Court Chief Judge Raymond Wyant, and he was supposed to do the government's own report and submit his report much, much earlier in the year, his interim report. If you were following closely, you will remember that that report was delayed. And then he was supposed to submit his final report this last Wednesday, but now says that report is not finished and he still has interviews to do. Initially, the government said that the interim report would be made public. Now, the government is saying the interim report will not be made public. And we don't have a timeline for a final report, and we don't have a timeline for the release of the final report. And to sum it all up, no one is surprised. We all knew this report would be delayed. We all know there would be drama around releasing it publicly. We can expect much more delay on this particular file.
Yeah. I'm going to just highlight, like, I don't know. I didn't check for sure. The interim report being released publicly is very rare. Like, I don't even know why
But
the government
minister
would have
said it
made
would
that
be.
commit. No. I get that, but I'm saying,
Yeah,
like, why did
I
you do
agree.
that? Most reports don't go back, and maybe that was for a transparency purpose, but usually you make a recommendation, you send it. Sometimes you'll see in consultation or investigations, like even a what we heard document, but I don't even think that's appropriate in this report.
What we heard about our own
Yeah, what we
internal
heard
scandal.
here's all of the, but anyways, I don't think it's playing out. Yes, I would say the expectations of a quick timeline when I think it was quite robust and they were having to do far more digging, whether that's a good sign or not, but that the original expectations or timelines were unrealistic. Again, I'm like still caught off on why you'd say an interim report was going to be released.
But why would they do
Because
any
I
of
think
this? Like you said, the timeline was so short. The
Mhm.
expectation to release an interim report is just unnecessary, I think. And there's so much interest and scrutinization around this whole process. Why? Why would the government set those expectations? It's crazy.
I agree. I think, like, in hindsight, they should have never said the interim report. You can get, I think, some grace for delaying a report because you want to do a proper job. I don't think that gave the government any real flack, as we want to do this right. So we're going to do this right. But yeah, I don't get the interim report thing, to be clear. Now it's where do we go? But okay, so I want to ask you, because you said, because so many people care. Do people care? Like, I used to hear it on the street, but I hear nothing now of anyone giving two poops about it. I'm trying not to
So
swear.
I do think that people care about this particular topic. I'm not sure that everyone really understands it. Like, I think people know there's a controversy around it and that more information will eventually come out, but like there's no smoking gun at this point. Like none of the cases have gone to court or gone to trial yet. There's no proof of any wrongdoing. There's only allegations. And so people sort of know that there is a possibility of an issue. Like I said, there's no smoking gun. On things like this, on process issues, I just don't think the public really cares. Like, does the public care that the government's investigator is going to take longer to do his report and that they won't see an interim report? Like, I don't think so. If at the end of the day, the Auditor General comes out with a report and the RCMP come out with a report and the government decides not to make public their own investigation, I think that will be a problem for them.
Yeah, I would say when we talked about this initially and the rolling challenges of every time it gets brought up, people care. I think they've kind of diffused that, right? I mean, an interim report that's going to say what anyway? Okay, cool, whatever. You're not going to release it. Blah,
The
blah,
idea
blah.
that
We'll
the
continue on
government's
with our
own
day. I think
report,
I think the Auditor General is what everyone's waiting for. So I don't even know if this one is going to have an impact one way or the other. And then it's, yeah, a fan is her suing the government warranted, right? Like, that's what people want to know.
and truthfully, I don't have high hopes for the government's own investigation into themselves. Like, I never thought that was going to be the real damning outcomes. So the fact that the government is delaying it and the fact that they are not making it public at this point, I don't know if it makes that much difference. Like, I will
No,
be
I think it'll look
interested in
bad
the
if
AG.
yeah, but if the AG report and the government's report doesn't align, I think that's more problematic for the government than not releasing a report or anything like that. So we'll continue waiting for any type of report, perhaps maybe in 2025.
They'd be smart. I was thinking, though, they'd be smart to release it when the AG reports come out,
100%. Yeah.
because then it's just one news cycle instead of two news cycles and potentially news cycles in between. It would be strategic for them to just hold and let it all blow up
Mhm.
at once. The problem with that is if the two reports have vastly different findings, it will be really obvious if they come out on the same day.
Well, I think that the government also should have their recommendations ready of, say, we know that this was found, this is what we're doing to correct it, take some humility, take some kicks to the gut. And like you said, align with whatever the AG, and also defer to the AG's report. I think that would be a smart play for the government should there be anything. If there's nothing on both sides, I still think that there is some recommendations and lessons learned to come from this. So I would expect the government would be making some amendments to a procurement to increase transparency. I think politically that would be a smart move. And there's a fine balance between admitting there's something wrong. But again, it's the AG report that we're all waiting for.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Okay,
Well,
in more
last
fiery
one.
topics.
Oh my gosh. Do you want me
This
to
is a wild
talk
one.
about it? This is like, you and I were like almost laughing about it yesterday. So Bruce McAllister, as Cheryl mentioned, is the executive director of Premier's office, or Calgary. Not quite sure of his title. As of now, it used to be Calgary when I was there. But anyways, he is part of Premier's senior leadership team. He is a former MLA for Chestermere area under the Wild Rose. He was a former journalist and broadcaster, I believe, for Global. And during the election, he was like the guy that did our evening news. So lots of time for the camera. He also does the government's recap to share about what the government's doing and has a bunch of interviews. So guy's on camera a lot and has been in the public light, both as an elected official and a journalist. So he's moderating, has a lot of experience, obviously, given that, to moderate panels. We briefly talked about him after a couple episodes ago when we were talking about the Edmonton, Alberta Next panel. And because there was some clips coming out about him being dismissive, I will say I was at that one. The people that he was calling out, from what people were standing and screaming. People wouldn't move from the mics. People were like coming up towards the panel. Like I thought someone was going to rush the stage. So, but I did say his temper, his approach to it, he didn't keep his cool. He wasn't cool as a cucumber in that setting. But Cheryl, do you want to talk about what we're now dealing with the one that I believe happened in Calgary earlier this week?
Yeah. So I wasn't in the room for those ones, but when you look at the previous compilations of Bruce McAllister's intervention, if you are a good moderator, no matter how much you dislike the approach of the people asking questions, you don't do that. But he took it one step further in Calgary, where a Calgary teenager got up to ask a question about teachers. And before we offer any more, maybe we'll just drop the clip in here.
Hi, my name is Evan Lee. I'm a Calgary high school student. Like many high school students, I'm very concerned about what's going to happen to the upcoming Alberta teachers strike. But just an hour ago, they voted 89.5 in favor of striking.
Evan?
And my question is, why is the government handing out
Here's the thing, Evan. Evan, I applaud you coming here to speak. I don't applaud how you're trying to speak. It's not making any sense. So we're going to move along, okay? Let's go over to this microphone, okay? I know you'd love some chaos, but your parents should turn you over your knee. Let's go over here.
Oh, that's rude. That's rude. No. Rude.
Go ahead.
That is disgraceful.
So not only did, to me, yes, I can see why the government wouldn't like the preamble and wouldn't like the question that this particular person was asking, but it was a completely fair question. And not only was his mic cut off, but then Bruce McAllister suggested that his parents should spank him, to which the room responded to. And I think we all agree this is wildly, I don't even know, irresponsible moderating. But Erica, you and I both agree that if you are a staffer, you should never, ever be the story. And following that town hall in Calgary, Bruce McAllister is the story. And actually, the premier was asked about him, which is doubly bad, in her next press conference.
Premier Summer saying that Bruce McAllister's apology for his spanking comment wasn't enough, and some, including the opposition leader, are calling on you to fire him. Will you be taking extra steps on this?
Bruce made an off-color comment. He apologized. I consider it at an end. I always take the view that you have to engage with people respectfully. That's my expectation of my staff, and I've asked him to do better next time.
Yeah, I mean, I can only say what I would do in that scenario. And I probably would have gone and found another job. Being asked, I don't think I'm very much, if you're ever going to be the news story, and maybe this is really old school, but it's like, you just resign. And I get that the premier is going to support him. She made him or he issued an apology. She accepted that. I think if your boss ever has to answer a question about you and your conduct, that to me, I feel very strongly that you shouldn't hold your role anymore, just for the benefit of her brand. You affect her and the government's credibility. And love Bruce. It's just, and not to say he has to do that, not to say that even the premier would accept that resignation if he brought that forward. I'm just speaking from what I would advise any political staffer, but I'd also do myself.
Yeah, I personally have never understood. Like, I also worked in the premier's office. I also worked at Global and had a background in broadcasting. I would have never, why would anyone put me in front of, I'm not an elected official, right? Like, I just don't understand why Bruce McAllister has this profile inside the government to hold these jobs where he gets to interact with people asking questions of elected officials or offer the public updates on what the government's up to. To me, those are jobs for elected officials, and I'm not sure why he had it in the first place. And he has demonstrated exactly why he shouldn't have it in the clips that we've seen coming out of these panels.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not surprised he was, given the role that he has in kind of being the face of the channel or the news outlet that the government has created to tell and address what the government's doing, having more long form content to be able to ask ministers about their policies or the premier themselves. So I'm not surprised that it's very untraditional. People like me just leave and then go do a podcast where I'm not tied to the office anymore. Yeah. I mean, it's a tough one because I do think that the challenge here is that it wasn't the one and only time. A comment like that is, I don't think anyone thinks it was acceptable or appropriate. I do get that someone was asking a question that was out of order of the topics at hand. They were asking about the education system. But again, I would have just let them say their piece and then said, okay, no one from the panel is going to address this. If you'd actually like to have a conversation, here's the MLAs on the side that can talk about that. But the stuff we're talking about on the Alberta Next panel doesn't have to do with that. So thank you, moving on. Give him his little minute or 45 seconds or whatever it is. I think it just could have been managed a lot different.
I mean, I disagree with that. It's kind of irrelevant, but I disagree with the idea that you can do town hall panels around the province where you're crowdsourcing referendum questions and only hear from people on the topics that are pre-approved by the premier and her advisors. To me, that is really, really undemocratic. And to shut people down every time they come to the mic to talk about something that is off topic, really undemocratic, but beside the point.
Yeah, and maybe they should have figured it out before, because Premier has actually addressed some of those questions, at least at the Edmonton one, others that I've heard of. She's volunteered, but again, maybe she's decided to do that and just address it, and then in the context of what that would mean. But again, I think as moderator, you just set your ground rules one or the other. We're either going to not talk about it at all, and I don't know if he set those ground games. I think it's unfortunate that the Premier had to address it in questions. I think there was 3 or 4 out of 10 in her press conference Q&A yesterday.
But on top of that, it's also so crazy that someone from the government, from the premier's office, feels so emboldened to talk to the general public like that. You can say, listen, we're off topic. This topic is not a part of the town hall. Again, I disagree with that, but they could say that. But to then say, to cut off his mic and then say your parents should spank you, that doesn't even make sense. First of all, it's so offensive. It's offensive to young people. It's offensive to Albertans. It's offensive to Calgarians. And who does Bruce McAllister think he is?
I mean, I have no rebuttal. So I guess on that note, we're done. I was tough but fair. Okay, well, that's another week. Thanks for listening. And we, fingers crossed, back next week. But in the meantime, follow us on X, Instagram, and TikTok.
And please do us a favor. The majority of people who are watching this podcast on YouTube and downloading it on podcast platforms are not hitting the subscribe button. We would love you to be subscribers. We would love your comments. Reading the comments on these episodes is the highlight of doing this show for us. So please like and subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
The Discourse is hosted by Cheryl Oates and Erica Barudis. Follow on Instagram @TheDiscoursePod. Subscribe to The Discourse on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.